Well, good morning, fellow patriots. Welcome to the 351st consecutive Friday meeting of the East Valley Red Friday Patriots. We have 95 present today, and quite frankly, I think that's outstanding considering the fact that I'm up here speaking and the Duttons aren't performing. So thanks for joining us this morning in support of America's deployed warfighters. I don't know about you, but I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing on a Friday morning than to be here with you folks honoring our deployed uniformed service members. Doing so gives me a sense of purpose, and I'm confident that each of you feel the same way. Did you guys enjoy the Duttons last Friday morning? I think they gave us a great prelude to their actual theater performance. So Hank and I attended their Saturday evening show, and it was absolutely spectacular at their Mesa Theater. And there's no question they are absolutely great entertainers, and I encourage you to go to one of their performances. You know, while driving over here this morning, I was thinking about one of my first cousins, Tom, who's about my age. Tom was born and raised over in East Texas in the little unincorporated community of Bon Weir, Texas. He was the third born of my mom's sister, Aunt Grace, who was lovingly referred to by the entire family as Moo. And to this day, no one in the family can remember how Aunt Grace was nicknamed Moo. Now, as kids, I'd see Tom on occasion at family reunions, and I quickly learned that Tom was a quite industrious kid with his numerous sideline after-school businesses of mowing yards and hauling off trash and helping many of the elderly folks in the community with chores like feeding livestock and hauling hay. He was even more industrious as an adult, although one might say that he was really not a people person. In fact, he never had a relationship that lasted any length of time, and one might say that Tom was a semi-recluse. Had it not been for his liquor store that he owned and operated as an adult for more than 25 years. Tom did really well for himself in that liquor store. Well, a few years ago, when Tom decided to retire and sell his liquor store, he purchased 50 acres of land and a small cabin in a remote part of central Alaska, about 100 miles from the township of Healy in the Denali borough, to live out what Tom would call a quiet and peaceful life. Well, after settling in, Tom had no human contact for months until one winter afternoon he heard a knock on his door. This huge, bearded man introduced himself and said, "The name's Lars, your neighbor from 40 miles up the road. Having a New Year's Eve party Friday at 5. You should come." Tom said, "Man, that sounds great." Well, Lars started to leave, then he turned around and he said, "Going to be some drinking." Tom said, "No problem, I can handle that." Lars said, "Probably some fighting too." Tom said, "I get along with folks, I'll be fine." Lars said, "Maybe some wild sex too." Tom grinned and said, "Even better. What should I wear?" Lars shrugged his shoulder and said, "Don't matter, just going to be the two of us." I don't know, but it appears we may have another Brokeback Mountain episode in the making, if you know what I mean. Before we recite the pledge, I want to remind you of the National Defense Authorization Act, amended in 2009, granting veterans in civilian clothes, as well as out-of-uniform service members, the right to render a hand salute during the playing of the national anthem, the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance, and the hoisting, lowering, or passing of the U.S. flag. This change allows for military-style salute to be used, or the traditional hand-over heart gesture. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. By the way, Brandy's not in here now, but today our waitress here today, Brandy, who has been waiting on this group for a long time, today is her birthday. So I want to take this opportunity to welcome a guest that we have this morning. Bob Blazek, where are you? Bob, will you stand one moment? Bob, you're an LPG resident, correct?
I'm visiting, yes.
You're visiting there for 2 weeks?
We leave next Friday. I've been here 2 weeks so far.
And you're going to be heading back to Minnesota?
Yep.
I met Bob the other evening at a function at our clubhouse over there and encouraged him to join us. I'm glad to see you here this morning.
Yep. Thanks for the invite.
Bob is a United States Army enlisted retiree. He served 1972 to 1994. 11 Bravo. Thank you for your service and thank you for joining us. Take this Red Friday program back to Minnesota, Bob, will you?
I will, Dick. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a hoo-ah for Bob? Thank you. This time I would ask that Colonel Ted Confederate come forward and introduce our guest speaker. Ted?
Good morning. This morning I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Tom Eisiminger, a retired United States Army officer and decorated combat veteran. Tom enlisted in the United States Army, was subsequently commissioned, and served in the Army's Field Artillery Branch. In addition to service during Desert Storm and Desert Shield, Tom deployed in support of Operation Desert Thunder 1 and Desert Thunder 2. Operation Desert Thunder was a 1998 U.S.-led military buildup in the Persian Gulf in response to Iraq President Saddam Hussein's restrictions on United Nations weapons inspections and violations of no-fly zones. Tom held numerous leadership positions in the Army from platoon to battalion command. As a staff officer, Tom served on the Joint Staff in the Plans and Policy Division, J5, as a member of the Balkans Task Force, which was implemented to monitor the environmental and human settlement impacts of the ongoing Balkans crisis. He led the largest geographically dispersed Army recruiting battalion responsible for operations in Southwest Washington, Oregon, Northern California, Hawaii, Korea, Japan, Guam, American Samoa, Commonwealths of the Northern Marianas Islands, and the freely associated states of the Republic of the Marshall Islands and the Federation State of Micronesia. He twice earned awards as top recruiting unit in the Army and elected to retire from the Armed Forces in 2005. Tom is a veterans advocate and serves as the president of the Veterans Medical Leadership Council. The Council's mission is to encourage quality medical and mental health care for Maricopa County veterans, to support initiatives that recognize our veterans' many contributions to the community, and honor our veterans and military members for their service to our country and the freedom we enjoy. The Council is currently committed to providing a critical financial safety net for those veterans and their families needing a hand up during the difficult transition back into society. This timely assistance helps keep a roof over their heads, put food on the table, and have transportation to medical appointments, rehabilitation, job training, and interviews. Tom will share more detail about the Council in his presentation. He is also a member of the Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame, class of 2018, and an honorary Kentucky Colonel. The Honorary Order of Kentucky Colonels is a charitable nonprofit 501 organization engaged in collective philanthropy for Kentuckians on the behalf of thousands who has received a Kentucky Colonel Commission from around the world. The Colonel also previously served as president of the Wounded Warrior Amputee softball team and was on the board of the directors of the Warrior Institute of Neuro Wellness House Rhythm Foundation. The foundation is a nonprofit organization designed to offer specialized service for veterans, first responders, and their families suffering with mental health disorders, PTSD, and physical disabilities such as traumatic brain injuries and amputations due to combat or public service tragedies. He is currently the president and CEO of Regenesis Biomedical, a medical device company dedicated to improving human welfare through the research, design, manufacture, and sale of energy-based medical products and services that alleviate pain, restore health, and improve quality of life. Tom earned a Bachelor of Science degree from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, a Master of Arts degree in National Security and Strategic Studies from the Naval War College, and a Master of Business Administration from Marylhurst University in Portland, Oregon. For a number of months, we have been in search of a guest speaker who might address how battlefield medicine has improved over 2.5 centuries, especially as it pertains to the U.S. Armed Forces. I believe that you will find Tom's presentation. Tom is fully qualified to address that topic. Here to highlight the evolution of military battlefield medicine, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Colonel Tom Eisiminger. I hope I didn't blow it too bad.
Well, thank you, everybody. I know you all thought, oh, God, another officer up here to tell me stuff. Just remember, I started as a 17-year-old 37 Foxtrot psychological operations specialist. That sounds really cool, but it meant I knew how to operate a printing press. Isn't that the way it always works? I can remember being a new lieutenant and having some soldier come up to me and said, my recruiter lied to me. Now, that was funny, right? My recruiter lied to me. My recruiter told me I was going to be a firefighter. He was a fire support specialist, an artilleryman, forward observer. He said he showed me a picture of a guy in a fire suit. And I said, well, do you enjoy what you're doing? He said, yeah, I do. I said, well, you're in the right place then. We'll fight fires together. So, and it's funny, the story about my recruiter lied to me because I ended up being a recruiter later on in my life. And I had to tell my recruiters, don't lie to these folks. Do not lie to them. They'll figure it out, and we'll end up getting less soldiers in. The one thing I'd like to share with this group, how about the power of the veteran's voice? Everybody see what happened yesterday? In one day, the voice of the veteran changed a policy. We need to keep that up. So let me get started on my talk. I'm an old artilleryman. We got a couple artillerymen here, but here we go. That's an MLRS guy. How an artilleryman got roped into doing a thing on medical. Probably because I'm a CEO of a medical company, but I do a lot of reading. I love history, so I'm going to run through some of the history of medical innovation in the armed forces, starting from the Revolutionary War, and sort of give you a history and educate a little bit on how warfare changes medicine. So I'm going to start with a couple objectives. So I want to run through the history and advances in military medicine from the 1700s to the present. I want to highlight the impacts on disease, on casualty rates throughout history, and I want to talk to you about how survival was improved with these innovations. And I'm going to start with the Revolutionary War. This was very, very rudimentary. In fact, there weren't a lot of doctors on the battlefield. Everybody heard of Molly Pitcher, Florence Nightingale? I mean, there were a lot of nurses out there trying to do the best they could. There was no anesthesia, so when they had to do an amputation, they did it without anesthetic. They just cut the leg off. Disease was rampant, so you had smallpox, you had dysentery, so diarrhea where people were completely dehydrated because of it. And those diseases were often more deadly than combat. I will tell you that the combat casualties could have been worse if General Washington wasn't the commander of troops. Washington was doing what they call a Fabian strategy, which meant he never wanted to get his troops decisively engaged because he knew that his troops, his patriots, were the center of gravity. And if the British were able to destroy his troops, we would not have won the revolution. The other part is those patriots, and I'm a descendant of 14 Revolutionary War patriots on both sides of my family. Started with Andreas Eisiminger, coming to Pennsylvania in 1751, and all 14 of them were farmers. Most of the patriots were farmers, and they had to get back. See, Washington knew this. My farmers had to get back to bring their crops in. So if I'm gonna fight, what do they say? Who's from Nebraska? Make hay when the sun shines, right? It's the same thing with warfare. Washington knew he had to fight just before those enlistments were running out. So how many remember the crossing of the Delaware? Why did he do that at Christmas time? Because the enlistments were running out on the 1st of January. That's why I went into Princeton and Trenton. Those are two battles that the Patriots won. But the Fabian strategy said, I won't get my troops decisively engaged unless I have to. I'm going to delay long enough so the French join the fight. And they did. Marquis de Lafayette, Count de Rochambeau. But what really turned the tide and reduced the number of battlefield casualties was when the French Navy came in. Now, we bailed the French out 3 more times down the road, so we paid them back. They gave us the Statue of Liberty, but I will tell you that it would have been a lot worse had Washington not employed that strategy. So then you go to Civil War. We're still dealing with disease, but the scale has gotten even bigger because now we're talking frontal assaults against cannons and muskets and rifles. Rifles was a new innovation. They were much more accurate and more deadly. And so the estimates are that 2/3 of every casualty, every death during the Civil War was from disease. And the other ones were gruesome. Cannonball to the chest, amputations, and amputations were common, though now they use chloroform. So they were given an anesthetic before they did the amputation. When I talk about the Fabian strategy with George Washington, there was a guy named Joseph Johnson, who was a Confederate general. He was the senior American officer to defect and go to the South. Everyone knows Robert E. Lee. He was fighting the northern campaigns up in Virginia. Joseph Johnson was fighting the campaigns in Georgia and Tennessee. He tried to do a Fabian strategy and not get his troops decisively engaged to reduce the battlefield casualties with the hope that the British or the French would join the side of the Confederates. Unfortunately, the president of the Confederate States didn't like that strategy and fired him. And so I always say John Bell Hood, which Fort Hood is named after, or it was named after. They changed it. It's named after another Hood now. But John Bell Hood did what Sherman couldn't do, and that was destroy Joseph Johnson's army. He went headlong, fought in Nashville. If anyone's done Civil War research, in Nashville, the Confederate Army was destroyed. And I can tell you that Johnson's strategy of delay might have won, because there was a guy running for president against Lincoln who had been a former commander of the Union Army, McClellan. And had McClellan won, he was running as a peace Democrat, we wouldn't have had a United States. He would have settled and given the Confederate States the South. What happened? Sherman took Atlanta. And on September 1st, remember the election's in November, he sent a telegram to President Lincoln that said, "Mr. President, I present you the city of Atlanta." And of course, Lincoln won the election. And then Ford's Theater came along about 3 months later, but we would not have been a United States had that not happened. So let me go on to 19th century. Spanish-American War. Disease was still a big problem. Typhoid, smallpox. But now they started saying, we're losing all these military service members to yellow fever, typhoid, and what came of that was vaccines. Vaccines came from that. So in future conflicts, disease was not as prevalent in terms of casualties. World War I. And I picked this picture on purpose because there is a reason they call it trench foot. It's because you stand in water in the trenches all day long. How many Vietnam veterans in here? Yeah, you know about the importance of dry feet and new socks so you don't get trench foot. Did anybody ever get trench foot? It's extremely painful. What they did do, they had, in World War I, they developed triage, where they would take the worst of the worst and treat them first. But you had plastic surgery out of World War I grew by leaps and bounds. Because when you poke your head up over the top of that trench, what gets hit? And so there were a lot of facial disfigurations that plastic surgeons developed lots of techniques to repair. Lots of techniques to repair. I'm going to digress a little bit because that poking up over the reminded me of a story. I was working with a patient that had climbed Point du Hoc as an Army Ranger. And I said to him, "My God, how could you do that?" And he said, "Tom, you've watched too many movies." And I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "That was the safest place to be. When you're on the side, they're shooting here, you're safe there." And he said, "But when you put your head up, it sucks." This is where history sometimes gets it wrong. So let's go to World War II. Now we had antibiotics, smallpox vaccinations. We had antibiotics where we could treat inflammation. We could treat infection on the battlefield. And this is a picture of the Philippines where they actually have surgery in a cave. And they're able to do surgery forward. They improved the evacuation during World War II to get people out. In fact, out of the Pacific, they had hospital planes flying from the islands back to Hawaii so that we could get the troops rehabbed. Let me go to MASH, Korea. It's not like the TV show. Everything wasn't done by helicopters. Helicopters were there. But this is where they developed surgical units that were about 30 miles behind front lines. And they had surgeons there to repair the damage. But a lot of times they came in cracker boxes. So they were driven there. There were helicopters, but it didn't get really prevalent as a medevac until you got into Vietnam. But this was where they started transfusions. A lot of blood transfusions happened in the Korean War. Vietnam was when medevac happened. Everything was by helicopter. And now you can't, there's helicopters outside every major medical center now because they realize that time is of the essence. Stop the bleeding, treat for shock, and get them fixed. So there were a lot of advances in terms of medical logistics. And now let's go to the Gulf Wars. Tourniquets became a big thing. There were improvements in tourniquets. They now have hemostatic agents in bandages that are made from shrimp shells that will clot the blood right away. So stop the bleeding is the first thing you do, right? Well, a sucking chest wound is hard to stop the bleeding. These new bandages stop the bleeding within about 5 minutes. It's really, that's a huge advancement. Almost every first responder carries these with them now, in case they come upon an accident and you've got a bleeder. So body armor prevented a lot of injuries to the trunk. But if you saw my bio, I was part of the Wounded Warrior amputee softball team. It didn't stop extremity injuries, they went up. But I will tell you an innovation that came about is these kids, and I say kids, because I've got a kid in the Army that's a sergeant first class. That's the age of the players that I saw. A couple of them were double amputees, and if they weren't wearing shorts, you wouldn't know they were an amputee. The improvement in prosthetics is amazing. In fact, one of them is a Long Island police officer right now, and recently chased a perpetrator down and caught him. Double amputee, below the knee amputee. So the improvements in that are huge. But I will tell you, and this is, I'm going to pretty soon get into my nonprofit, this generation's Agent Orange is TBI, traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. In Vietnam, when you left the wire, you knew you were on high alert because I could meet the enemy at any time. In this conflict, it doesn't matter what your rating is, what your MOS is, you are always on guard. Always. IEDs are hitting troops in the rear. And there is a link between traumatic brain injury and increased suicide rates. It's not a mental health thing necessarily. It's a physical manifestation of having your brain knocked around inside your skull. And speaking of veteran suicide, I want to lay this out because I think we need to get ahead of this soon. Or, Agent Orange, think about Vietnam. Anybody that has diabetes that was anywhere near Vietnam is service-connected. We're going to have a bigger problem 20 years from now with this generation if we don't get ahead of it now. Arizona, the VA released their suicide statistics last Friday. Why they choose to release things late on Friday, I don't know, but I read it this weekend. Arizona, unfortunately, is number 10 in terms of the 50 states in per capita veteran suicide. We got to fix that. We got to fix that. So, the biggest thing in the early conflicts was disease. We now have vaccines, we've got drugs that help treat all that, and the number of deaths by disease has gone down exponentially. We do have antiseptic, it's not chloroform anymore. It's not just cut the leg off like it was in the Revolutionary War. We got full-scale operating rooms. And because of helicopters, we're getting the troops that are injured there quickly so they can be stabilized and then be shipped out to current, recently it was shipped to Landstuhl, to a safe hospital system, and then they were shipped to typically Walter Reed or to the burn unit in San Antonio, and they did that within hours. Hours. I talked to a lot of these guys that were on the amputee softball team about their experience when they hit their IED and lost their limb, and they were back in the United States within 24 hours in a lot of cases, 24 to 48 hours, to get treated, to get rehab, to get fit for a prosthetic. And those prosthetics are so good, there are lots of stories of warriors that went back to combat with a fake leg. Lots of stories. Helicopter evacuation, now it's in the civilian community. That is something that was a military innovation that carried over to the civilian. I will share another one with you that's not medical, but all these GPS systems that we're using started as a military system. I know during Desert Storm, I shot off a GPS with artillery units. They were that accurate. And then casualty care. So immediately being able to stop the bleeding with tourniquets and these chitosan hemorrhaging bandages has been a huge differentiation. I'll name a couple other ones. Hyperbaric medicine. That started after World War II because we had a lot of divers that had issues with the bends. Now they know it works for wound care. There's been some experimentation on mental health. That came out of the military. You could say the technology that I use at Regenesis came out of the military as well, because we use electromagnetic energy to elicit a biological response in the body that stops pain. And our company's focused on diabetic neuropathy. That actually came from technology from World War II. So I've already gone through that. We don't have to worry about diseases anymore. We don't have to worry about somebody bleeding out on the battlefield because now we can stop it. We can get them to a surgeon, get them stabilized, and then get them to where they can get their final rehabilitation care. But we need to take care of them when they're done with service. And that goes back to my comment about the power of the voice of the veteran. Because the administration was going to, Secretary Collins and VA said, look, if the meds you're taking helps you with this disability that you have, we're going to give you a 0% rating. It took one day, and the outrage and the letters from veterans, they stopped it because they realized that was a mistake. So we have a voice. We need to use it. Any questions on any of this? I love the history. The military brings a lot to our society that a lot of people don't realize. Now I'm going to transition really quickly into what the Veterans Medical Leadership Council does. This is what I do as a passion. I work as a CEO. That's a passion too, but I do that to pay the mortgage. This is what I love doing, is being a battle buddy. So the Veterans Medical Leadership Council was founded in 1999 by Paula Padine. I don't know if anybody knows that name, but she was the public affairs officer at the Phoenix VA. She got a bunch of military veterans that were in prestigious positions around the valley to be advocates for veterans and to consult with the hospital director at the time. And that's where it started. It eventually morphed into the organization that ran the Phoenix Veterans Day Parade. And then in 2009, they had some money left over that they had raised from the Veterans Day Parade, and they started working with the social workers at the VA and said, do we have veterans that are at risk of losing their home or losing their job, typically because the car is broken down? And that started in 2009. They started capturing data in 2013. From 2013 through 2025, the VMLC has given $5 million to over 4,000 veterans and family members to help prevent them from losing a job, and that's the broken down car, or from losing their home, and that's because they couldn't afford the rent. I will share with you that 70% of all funds that we put out are to prevent homelessness. In Phoenix now, private equity groups are coming in and buying apartment complexes, displacing everyone in that apartment complex, putting $1 million into it, and then raising the rents double. So the veteran's out. They have to go find another place. When they went into that apartment complex, their deposit was $250. That was 10, 15 years ago. Now it's first and last month's rent. The average rent's about $1,900 a month. And so you got veterans who are on Social Security and VA disability, and they can't afford it. They couldn't afford to pay 2 months. So VMLC has paid deposits so they don't lose the roof over their head. 70% of the funds go to that. We support veterans in Prescott VA, in the Phoenix VA, and we just raised enough money last year to open the Tucson VA. So we're going to be able to support every veteran in the state of Arizona that's enrolled in VA healthcare. So what I'd ask this group to do is, if you know someone that's not enrolled in VA healthcare, tell them to enroll just so they have access to this. Just so they have access to this. I get it that some people don't trust the VA, but we need to get people to enroll because they can't take advantage of this program. The social workers identify the need. There are state programs, but I can tell you the state program, it's called the MRF Fund. It takes 90 days to get the money into the hands of the vendor, the landlord, and by that time they're already been evicted. There are federal government programs, but it takes even longer. As you can imagine, it's a bureaucracy. Fill out these 15 pages. What we do is the social worker said, this is a bona fide need. We write the check that day. And we have had members of our staff have driven to the west side of Phoenix and handed cash to a landlord to prevent an eviction. So, and we call it stopping the spiral. We call this upstream intervention. So if you look at this graphic behind me, it's a cyclone. Veteran loses their job first, typically because they can't get to work, their vehicle's broken down. 1 month away from losing their home. You lose your job, you've lost your connection to your colleagues and friends. Now your family doesn't know where you're living, so you've lost connection to your family. And you're that far away from losing hope. And what happens when you lose hope? And let me show you the scope of the problem. First, I want to say our values as an organization, we're lightning fast. That's what separates us apart. We can write the check same day. We say together we make a difference, and what we mean by that is it's not just VMLC. It's this organization as well. We can all work together to help stop or slow down veteran suicide. And show up and get stuff done. Hey, we're a veterans organization. That wasn't the word we used. Show up and get stuff done? No, that's not what we said, but we show up and get it done. Here's the problem. This is from the Arizona Violent Death Reporting System. We've got an Army veteran at ASU, PhD, that runs this program, and he analyzes veteran suicides in the state of Arizona. 20% of every suicide in the state of Arizona is a veteran. And yet, the population in Arizona is less than 8% of Arizonans are veterans. So you can see the scope of the problem. Now look at the suicide rates per 100,000 population by veteran status, and you can see it's almost twice as much male. It's definitely twice as high in the female veteran population. With that, I will share that 22% of every dollar we give goes to a female veteran. 8% of veterans in the state are female. And why is that? Well, there's a lot of, I'll just say it, a lot of dogs out there that leave their wife and 2 kids and not give them any money, not support their children. And so you have female veterans that end up in crisis a lot more often. So we're focused on that. Here's the real catch. Suicide rates by ethnicity, and you can see in several of the populations, white, black, and Hispanic, it's very high. in the veteran population. In the Native American population, it's about the same. But here's the statistic that hits me. I've got a 36-year-old son that's a sergeant first class that has 3 years till he retires. He fits that first demographic. He's been deployed, 18 to 34. That's the rate. It's 18% for the general population, and in the 18 to 34-year-old, it's 76%. These are the warriors that fought in Afghanistan, Iraq, Mindanao, Ethiopia. We have operations going on everywhere in the world. And then it sort of normalizes. Even for somebody my age, it's normalized. It's about 2 times higher. But then for some reason, when you get to 75 and up, the veteran suicide rate spikes again. Now, why is that? We're living on fixed incomes. My spouse dies. I lose Social Security that she was bringing in. I've lost hope. The other reason the veteran suicide rate is so high, and I hate to say it this way, but it's the truth, veterans get it right the first time. There is no ideation. There's no, I'm going to take all these pills and my family's going to find me and I'm going to go to the ER and they're going to pump my stomach. Veterans use weapons. Almost 80% of veteran suicides are with weapons. So one of the things VMLC does is we pass out gun locks at our events. And we ask the veteran to lock your weapons and give the keys to a loved one. When you want to go to a range, get the keys, get your weapons, go to the range. But don't leave the weapons unsecured. I mean, when you say to a veteran, give me your guns, it brings back the NRA speech that a very famous actor said, from my cold dead fingers are you going to get my weapons. But we have to do something about securing them. So, and then this is by county and veteran status. And what I'll say is the more rural the veteran is, they don't have access to care. They don't have access where they can just pick up the phone or walk into an ER and saying, I'm having a crisis. The more inclined they are to commit suicide. So the remoteness is a problem. So if you look at Yuma and Yavapai County and Gila, Mojave, those are very, very remote. And those rates are much higher. So we believe in swimming upstream. Our view is the further upstream you go to do the intervention, the less problems you're going to have on the bottom. Once a veteran becomes homeless, it's chronic. It's very difficult to get them back into a home. So we prevent the loss of a home, prevent the loss of a job, and I'll even say this. This is about the community working together. I personally think the services need to do a better job of reintegrating into civilian society. I remember when I left, they said, Tom, here's how you write a resume. Okay. Well, how are you going to help me find what I'm good at? They never did that. The cadre of people that left the military when I did are on their 3rd or 4th job because they never found what they really liked doing. We need to do a better job because you lose a sense of purpose when you leave the military. Who am I? I can tell I'm not Colonel Eisiminger anymore. That's behind me. I'm Tom. I've got another purpose. I've got another purpose. But how many of you all know that colonel that couldn't walk away from that title? I'm the colonel, or I'm the general. NFL athletes have the same issue when they leave their service, when they leave playing. We need to do that for our warriors. And with that, any questions on anything that I've presented? I know I'm a little long-winded sometimes, but I'm passionate. I am passionate. So, thank you.
Working? Done? Okay, good. Tom, we thank you very much for coming and presenting to us. We have a couple of things we'd like to give you. Here.
Thank you.
First of all, we'd like to present you a certificate for the Order of the Red.
And this certificate, Tom, states that we hereby recognize and commend Lieutenant Colonel Tom Eisiminger, Jr., U.S. Army retired, for his honorable military service, veteran support initiatives, and support of the East Valley Red Friday Patriots.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.
One more thing, Tom. We've got a pin, our Red Friday pin.
Awesome.
Coveted by all of us. I won't pound it in. I'll put it in
Okay.
there.
It's okay. Just don't hit the collarbone.
I got you. This is the kindler, gentler.
Okay.
It doesn't want to go through the shirt. There we go.
There we are. Thank you.
And I'll put these clips on it for you.
Anybody know the name of those clips? Frogs. They're called dammits.
There you go.
You know why?
Damn it.
Congratulations.
Damn it, because they never stick.
Thank you
Hey,
again.
thank you.
May I have an applause for Tom? Thank you.
We're done.
I do have a couple of three announcements that I would like to make prior to dismissal. One, and I have no clue as to the purpose of this, but I was asked to request that you save your paper towel and toilet tissue tubes and bring them here next Friday. Bring them here each Friday for a while. Paper, towel, and toilet tissue tubes. Empty, yeah, please, empty. That would definitely help a lot. Also, I just want to make mention, this organization, we pay no dues. We request no dues. We have really no obligation to anyone other than I feel that we have an obligation to this American Legion Post 27. And the obligation is that they bring in a kitchen staff in here very early to support this Red Friday, and only this Red Friday is that staff in here as early as it is. They provide us a wait staff to clean up our plates and dishes afterwards. But more importantly, they provide us with this absolutely beautiful dining hall, fully capable of supporting the type of attendance that we have. And they've been extremely responsive to anything that we have ever asked of them. So the only thing that I would ask is, you buy breakfast whenever you come to this meeting. That's the least that we can ask, that we can do for them. And if you don't eat breakfast, buy breakfast anyhow. Take it home, give it to a friend. If you don't want to even serve, then buy breakfast. We're not charged for this facility, but I can assure you, you try to get any kind of facility anywhere in the valley that will facilitate this size and see what you're going to be paying. And I would ask, where the hell are the funds going to come from? We don't ask you to pay for dues. So please, buy breakfast. If you cannot buy breakfast legitimately, if that is a financial strain on you, you come to me, I will guarantee you I will buy your breakfast. Okay? So, to our guests, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we sincerely appreciate, Bob, your joining us, and hope that you will definitely return when you head back here from Minnesota. I also hope that you will be able to take this type of mission up to northwest Minnesota, is it? Northwest Minnesota. And as a final reminder, let us not overlook the importance of this Red Friday mission to keep our deployed warfighters in our thoughts and prayers, and to continue to demonstrate our support for these fine men and women. Thank you, Tom. Wonderful presentation. You guys have a great weekend.